You open this because, on some intuitive level, you already sense what it's about. Not logically or in clear words, but something within you recognized the signal before your mind could explain it. This isn't coincidence. A quiet question has been living inside you, waiting to be acknowledged. You were drawn here for a reason. The unfolding remains uncertain by design. If the answer were obvious from the start, the experience would lose its depth and power. This isn't merely to inform you. It's intended to shift something inside, to gently disturb the comforting narratives you rely on for certainty. As you continue, moments may feel uncomfortably precise, speaking directly to hidden parts of you. That recognition can reassure at first, then confuse. Real insight often does. It challenges your understanding of yourself, your choices, and your path. You may wonder if you'll find the answer you sought or leave with more questions. That tension is intentional. Clarity doesn't always mean certainty. Sometimes it arrives as deeper awareness. Stay until the end. Meaning emerges gradually. Leaving too soon leaves you sensing something vital forming without seeing how it connects. Remain present. Let the uncertainty do its work. Only then will you understand why you were meant to be here. This person loves you, but this love was never supposed to happen, not because it is false, not because it lacks sincerity or depth, or the kind of weight that reshapes a person quietly, invisibly, over months, but because it arrived ahead of alignment. It arrived before the inner architecture was ready to receive it without cracking. And yes, dear soul, the cosmic order does not yet allow it to rest, to settle, to take the form the heart so desperately longs for. Not because the love is wrong, not because the feeling is mistaken or manufactured or rooted in illusion, but because it is too right, too precise, too particular for the versions of you that first encountered each other. There are connections that are not born to comfort. They are born to awaken. They arrive like something struck against stone, and the spark they make is not meant to warm you immediately. It is meant to illuminate the room you have been sitting in with the lights off for years. The room you had convinced yourself was perfectly fine in the dark. The room you had stopped noticing entirely. This is one of those connections, and you felt it from the first moment, which is precisely why it frightened you both. From the instant your paths crossed, something ancient stirred. Not in the mind first, not through thought or choice, or the slow, deliberate architecture of mutual interest, but in the body, in the nervous system, in those unconscious layers of the self that predate language and logic, the layers that operate through sensation and recognition, and a kind of knowing that cannot be made into words without losing something essential. You felt seen without having explained yourself. You felt exposed without having been accused of anything. You were drawn in not by reason, but by something far older than reason. And the pull was disorienting because it was real in a way that most things you encounter are not quite real. This was not romance in the ordinary sense of the word. This was mirroring. It was two people standing before one another and seeing, without wanting to, aspects of themselves reflected back with uncommon clarity. And mirrors are not gentle instruments. They do not soften. They do not flatter in the way that affection sometimes flatters. They are precise. They show you exactly what is there and what has always been there, and what you have been working very hard not to look at directly. In this connection, One of you naturally embodied direction, presence, grounding, a quality of steady outward force, of moving through the world with apparent certainty, of taking up space in the way that those who have learned to armor themselves can appear to do effortlessly. The other carried sensitivity, intuition, and emotional truth, a quality of deep inner knowing, of feeling the temperature of a room before entering it, of existing in close contact with the felt sense of things. These were not roles chosen consciously or performed for the benefit of the other. They were polarities arising from inner structure, from the accumulated scar tissue and coping strategies and genuine gifts that each person had developed in the years before they ever met. The relationship did not create these qualities. It revealed them. It placed them in close proximity and then stepped back to observe the friction. And that is where the tension began. Not from incompatibility, but from its opposite. Because love, when it touches the unintegrated parts of the psyche, the parts that have been buried beneath function and performance and the daily insistence on being fine, does not soothe those parts. It activates them. It calls them forward with a kind of relentless tenderness that is, paradoxically, very difficult to bear. It pulls shadow to the surface, not to humiliate, but to heal. It demands awareness in places where you have practiced unawareness for so long that the practice has become invisible. And when the inner world is not yet ready to meet itself honestly, when the work of self-confrontation has not yet been undertaken in earnest, love becomes overwhelming rather than safe. It feels less like an opening and more like a detonation, less like a gift and more like a demand that you are not sure you know how to meet. This is why the love feels blocked by something larger than circumstance, why timing feels not merely inconvenient, but actively cruel, why the external reality refuses to cooperate no matter how strong the pull between you becomes. It is not punishment. It is regulation. It is a kind of higher intelligence operating through delay and obstacle and emotional asymmetry, preventing union before individuation, because union before individuation does not last. It cannot. Two people who have not yet found themselves cannot find each other in any way that holds. One of you feels this connection emotionally, viscerally, spiritually, as something written into your particular frequency, something you recognize from somewhere you cannot locate, but cannot doubt. The other feels it intellectually first, existentially, as a disturbance in the careful order of their inner life, and then panics. Not because the love is absent in them, not because they feel nothing, but because what they feel threatens the entire structure that has kept them functional, protected, and in control. To love fully here would require dismantling defenses that were not built in a day, defenses constructed carefully over years in response to real losses, real abandonments, real experiences that taught the psyche that vulnerability is not safe. To stay, to truly remain present in the heat of this particular connection, would mean facing wounds that have been kept with great discipline, well below the surface. And the psyche, which does not distinguish between genuine danger and the danger of feeling, resists that kind of dismantling with everything it has. It calls it self-preservation, and in its own terms, it is not wrong. So distance appears between you, not from indifference, not from a change of heart, but from the terrified self-protection of someone who caught a glimpse of how completely they could be undone by what they feel. Silence arrives in the place where language was beginning to build something real. Confusion takes up residence where clarity had briefly, tantalizingly lived. And yet the bond does not disappear. It does not weaken or dissolve. It simply retreats inward. It travels beneath the level of interaction and continues its work there, in the interior landscape, in the place that neither distance, nor decision, nor deliberate avoidance can reach. This is the central paradox of this love. Separation does not weaken it. It intensifies it internally. With each day of silence, the longing does not become louder. It becomes quieter and deeper, more rooted, more structural. The thoughts do not become more frequent. They become less frequent, but more charged, each one carrying more weight, more precision, more of the knowledge that something true was glimpsed and not yet resolved. The connection shifts its medium, moving from external interaction to internal dialogue. It appears in dreams. It arrives in sudden, unexpected surges of emotion that seem to have no immediate cause. It announces itself in moments of inexplicable knowing, a sense of contact that occurs without contact, an awareness that has no adequate rational explanation, but that is unmistakably real. This is not obsession. It is not pathology or unhealthy attachment, or the echo of an anxious mind feeding on its own hunger. It is unfinished integration. It is the psyche continuing a process that was begun between two people, completing its work internally in the absence of the external relationship. Because the work must be done regardless of whether the relationship continues. Because what this connection truly asks is not union with the other person. It is union with the self. The one who leads outwardly, who moves through the world from a position of apparent composure and direction, is being asked by this love, through this love, to descend, to move inward, which is the direction they most resist, to confront the emotional avoidance that is masqueraded so convincingly as strength, to stop running from vulnerability by calling the running independence, calling it focus, calling it the reasonable prioritization of important things. The armor is real, but it is also a cage. And this love is the first thing in perhaps a very long time that has made the cage visible from the inside. The one who feels deeply, who has always lived close to the emotional surface of things, who senses and intuits and gives and gives and gives from a place of genuine love, but also of genuine need, is being asked to rise, to ascend into something that for them is harder than feeling: sovereignty. The work for them is not to feel more, but to feel differently, to stop giving in excess of what is received and calling the excess devotion, to stop anchoring their sense of worth to whether or not they are chosen, to learn that wholeness does not require permission from someone else's love, that completeness is not something that another person can grant you, no matter how much you love them or how much they love you back. Until both of those movements begin to occur, not complete, not finished, but genuinely underway, the cosmos holds the line. Not as cruelty, not as rejection, but as the most loving boundary possible. The insistence that something extraordinary not be squandered by arriving before the people involved can hold it without losing themselves entirely in its current. This is why forcing reunion feels not merely difficult, but genuinely exhausting, like pushing against something that is not merely resistant, but actively and intelligently immovable. Why chasing clarity only produces more distance, more confusion, more of the painful hall of mirrors quality that makes this kind of love so disorienting. Why surrender? Not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of releasing the desperate grip on outcome, the insistence that this love take the form you have already decided it must take, becomes the only path that brings anything resembling peace. Because the love was never meant to be used as a relationship before it was understood as a catalyst. It was never meant to be a destination before it had a chance to be a direction. And yet, make no mistake, this love is real. It is not a projection. It is not a fantasy constructed from longing and confirmed by wishful pattern matching. It is real in the way that dreams are real before they are lived. Real in the way that what is true about a person exists before anyone around them can see it clearly. Real in the way that transformation hurts because it is not cosmetic, not superficial, not a rearrangement of existing furniture, but a structural renovation that cannot happen without the difficulty it requires. The tragedy is not that this love cannot happen now. The tragedy, the genuine loss, the outcome to be mourned and actively prevented, would be if it happened too soon. Before either person has done the interior work that would allow them to be present within it without being destroyed by it, without destroying the other, without retreating once again into the familiar comfort of the defended self. So the universe intervenes, gently but firmly, through delays that seem arbitrary but are not, through misunderstandings that seem like failures of communication but are actually failures of readiness, through an emotional asymmetry that will not resolve itself through conversation alone, through silence that feels unbearable to the one waiting inside it, and that is, in its unbearability, doing its necessary work. Because this connection is not meant to complete you. It was never designed to fill in the missing parts, to compensate for what has not been developed, to save anyone from the work of becoming who they are. It is meant to initiate you, to begin a process, to strike the spark that makes the dark room visible, to wake something in each of you that, once woken, cannot sleep again, and that, once you stop fighting against the waking, becomes the most valuable thing this love has given you, regardless of what form the relationship ultimately takes. The love exists to move you into truth, into the willingness to see yourself without the stories you have been telling yourself for years, into integration of the parts that have been kept separate because their integration seemed too costly, into a wholeness that belongs entirely to you and cannot be taken from you when someone walks away, because it was not given to you by their presence. It was built by you, for you, catalyzed by love, but not dependent on it. And only when both of you no longer need this connection to define you, only when the love between you becomes a choice made from fullness rather than a hunger that cannot be satisfied.
Only when the inner masculine and the inner feminine within each individual psyche find their particular balance, only then does the alignment shift. Only then does the cosmic holding pattern release. Until that moment, the love remains suspended, alive and intact, and untouchable by time, by silence, by distance, by all the ordinary forces that usually erode feeling and make it ordinary. It waits with a patience you are not yet certain you possess. Not denied, not lost, just waiting for you to become who you were always meant to be, before the love ever found you.